we have to address the elephant in the room. Brock Lesnar set to return to UFC for a one-off fight on July 9th against Mark Hunt. The news broke over the weekend, on Saturday, actually. Saturday night, Sunday morning, whatever. It was Saturday night, technically, at UFC 198. Maybe it was 199. I'm pretty sure it was 198, but either way. So I had John over my place on Saturday, and I went upstairs real quick, and I wasn't really on Twitter for most of the day. But I checked Twitter, and people were, the rumors were running rampant that Brock Lesnar, something had leaked from Ariel Helwani. That was a whole other story in and of itself, that he was banned from UFC. I guess they lifted the ban, thank God. I thought that was stupid. But anyway, so he broke the news on MMAfighting.com or one of those websites that Brock Lesnar was in negotiations with UFC to fight one more time for UFC 200. I didn't believe it. Many people didn't believe it. I just found it completely unbelievable, I guess is the word for it, just because he's currently signed to the WWE, and never in a million years did I think something like that would happen. So fast forward a couple hours, and John took off, and I was watching TV, and my brother had ESPN on, and just so happened when he changed the channel to ESPN and I was paying attention, I see Jonathan Coachman and Chael Sonnen breaking the news that it's official. It was made official at the end of UFC 198 with the pay-per-view on Saturday night, that Brock Lesnar is back. The Beast is back, baby, for UFC 200 next month against Mark Hunt. I mean, the news didn't break until Monday. Lesnar didn't reveal his opponent until Monday on ESPN, SportsCenter, or whatever, that he was facing Mark Hunt. But the news first officially broke that he was fighting, period, at the show on Saturday. And I could not have been any more ecstatic. So a lot of thoughts about this, obviously. Is Brock Lesnar, I've got a lot of questions about this, and hashtag AskGSM on Twitter. I see a lot of questions and concerns, and, excitement obviously is in the air, which is great. I'm certainly excited for it. So a lot of questions here. Is Brock Lesnar still with WWE? Yes, that goes without saying. I'm actually kind of shocked they did not mention it on Raw last night. I mean, it's not like they're not acknowledging his presence in UFC. They went so far as to put out a press release. I mean, probably capitalizing off of the all the buzz and the press releases and the media and whatever, the media attention that the whole fight garnered on Saturday night over the weekend. But WWE put out a press release late Saturday saying that Brock Lesnar is still under contract with the WWE, and he will compete in the UFC 200 at UFC 200 as a one-off opportunity. And then after that historic milestone, as they called it, he'll be back in time for SummerSlam on August 21st. So a lot in that one little press release there, only in a few sentences. So Lesnar is back in the UFC for a one-off opportunity. He's sticking with WWE. I believe his contract expires next spring or the following spring, either in 2018 or 2017 or 2018. I want to say it's 2018, but I'm not exactly sure. But anyway, this is big news. Like I said, obviously, if you can't tell, I'm pumped for it. And the thing is that it's a win-win for MMA and WWE fans, because I did not at all want to see Lesnar leave the company when he was on the verge of leaving back early last year, right before WrestleMania 31. His contract had expired right before WrestleMania or right after WrestleMania, whatever it was. And there was a lot of speculation. There had been strong speculation for months that Lesnar was on his way out of the company. He wouldn't resign. He wanted to go back to UFC. He was in, fighting condition. He had been going to training camps and blah, blah, blah. So, everyone was pretty much guessing that he's going back to the UFC. Ultimately, he resigned, and he said on ESPN that, his mind wasn't there. He was still passionate about it, but he just didn't really feel like he was in the right mindset to go back inside the octagon, whatever. So he re-signed with WWE, putting an end to his MMA career for now, until July 9th, 2016. So I guess when he re-signed, despite the fact that when he re-signed, he said that his MMA days were over inside the octagon, he apparently had a clause in his contract that said that he could work a UFC show after negotiating with Vince McMahon. I was shocked more than anything else that was never revealed ahead of time. That wasn't revealed when the contract was signed a year and a half ago, not by WWE, but you would think, a Wade Keller or a Dave Meltzer or someone would have had the inside scoop on this long before Ariel Helwani did on Saturday night. But apparently not. So like I said, really taking the entire world and the internet and everything else completely by surprise by that little piece of news there. And I think it's great. I think it is absolutely awesome that we will see Lesnar not only in the UFC 200 for one more time, for one more fight, and then back in time for SummerSlam as well. That is, again, a win-win deal for WWE and UFC fans in that I really want to see him fight one more time. So I said to myself before he ultimately resigned with WWE last spring that, okay, if he leaves WWE, at least we get to see more of Lesnar in the UFC, because at the time he was in the UFC, I mean, I am still a casual UFC fan at best. But I had watched a few of his fights. I watched his fight when he won the title against, I believe, Cain Velasquez, or maybe he lost the title to Cain in September of 2010. But I saw when he won the belt, maybe against Frank Mir. I think that was the fight that I saw. In July of 2010, I don't know if I was there for when he dropped the title that fall, but I did watch his final fight in UFC at the tail end of 2011. The match went like all of a minute and a half. He got knocked out in like the first round or whatever against All-Star Overeem, and a total disappointment, announcing his retirement right afterwards. 2 rounds of diverticulitis or whatever the hell it's called. I know what it's called, but it's just completely difficult to pronounce. But you know what I mean. I believe he had 1 or 2 rounds of that or whatever it was, and he had a lot of health issues. Lesnar talked about that in his book that I read a couple years ago. Great read, by the way. Definitely check it out. But Lesnar has always been very open about doing it for the money. And he said that on ESPN on Monday. And that's what I love about Lesnar. People can't say, oh, he does it for the money. He has no passion. He doesn't like wrestling. But yes, he admits that, though. He does not try to pretend to be somebody that he's not. That's why I admire the Beast incarnate as much as I do. He is just completely open about his desires and just doing it for the money and just making a paycheck. He's not there to be one of the boys. He's not there because it was his lifelong dream to become a WWE wrestler. He is there to make money. He is there to make money and become champion so he can make even more money. You know what I mean? So that's what I love about Brock Lesnar. I've said that before, but he was very open about that in his interview with someone from ESPN on Monday. I didn't see the interview. I just read about it. He did do a cool little interview for Paul Heyman's YouTube channel on Monday night, right before Raw. You can check it out, the Heyman Hustle. But yeah, just bottom line, big news. I'm looking forward to this. I remember, and I'll talk about this quickly too, back in 2011, I think it was, late 2010, I remember rumors of, when Lesnar was still in the UFC, obviously, I don't know if his health was up to par or if he was just getting better, that there had been rumors that he was going to compete at WrestleMania after the whole Lesnar-Taker thing, which 5 years later led to another series of matches in 2014, 2015, some really good matches from those two. But, so there was a rumor going around in late 2010 after that whole confrontation between Lesnar and Taker at UFC, one of those shows. I don't remember what. I'm pretty sure actually it was after one of Lesnar's fights when he dropped the title to Cain Velasquez in September or October 2010, whatever it was. So they had that confrontation at the show, which led to a lot of speculation that Lesnar was coming in for a match against Taker at WrestleMania in Atlanta for WrestleMania 27. Obviously, it didn't come to fruition. I was hoping it would. And maybe Vince asked Dana White if he could borrow Lesnar for this one fight and maybe earn something for something in return. Obviously, Dana said no, and that was the end of that. But it's amazing to me, again, over 5 years later, 5.5 years later, that dream, but in the reverse scenario where it's Lesnar and WWE working a fight for UFC 200, is finally coming to fruition. So I think it's great. The cons of this, like I've said before, which a lot of people are worried about, 2 things. One, if he gets hurt, which is obviously the primary concern, and it was also revealed on Monday from some wrestling news website. I think I read it on Lords of Pain, but it also came from like PW Insider, blah, 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 that before Lesnar can fight at SummerSlam, he has to be cleared by the New York State Athletic Commission, or whatever it is, after the fight from UFC. So if he suffers a pretty serious injury at UFC 200, then he can't compete at SummerSlam. And WWE already has him booked. He didn't say who he's facing. He has no idea who he's facing at the show. So I don't know really what that would hold. I mean, I guess they would have to pull Lesnar from the show. Maybe he would have to make an appearance, or maybe I don't even think he can appear in the show if he's not cleared by the New York Athletic State Commission, whatever the hell it's called, like I said. But anyway, though, so that was interesting. I can't even say whether he will or won't get injured in the match or in the fight with Mark Hunt, because from what I've heard, Mark Hunt is no easy dude. I mean, I saw some picture of some jaw the guy broke, someone's jaw that Mark Hunt broke in a previous fight, and he's like 12-10. He's a real badass, and he's not going to be a pushover for Lesnar in his return to the Octagon. So it should be a hard-hitting affair, and I'm excited for that. It's not going to be a completely one-sided flop. Hopefully not, in case of Mark Hunt. But in the case that it's going to be an exciting match, it's going to be a hard-hitting affair, like I said, but hopefully Lesnar doesn't get hurt. That's the first con. The second con is whether he loses or not. And like I said in hashtag on Monday, I feel as if that if he does get, or rather if he doesn't get hurt, but if he just gets completely obliterated by Mark Hunt, he's done in a minute and a half, and the fight is as embarrassing as his last fight 5 years ago against All-Star Overeem or whatever, at the tail end of 2011, that will do damage to Brock Lesnar's credibility in WWE. He can always come out and squash a member of the Social Outcasts or beat up on Dean Ambrose again, and the guy's going to be just as over as he was before. But it would hurt that mystique that Lesnar has in WWE if he was completely squashed at UFC 200. Again, I don't foresee that being the case, as Lesnar has said himself. The last time we saw him in the Octagon, and even for the past couple of years before that, he was still suffering from diverticulitis. Even in its early stages before he got into the Octagon, as Paul Heyman alluded to in that interview I talked about earlier. So, I mean, this is Lesnar at, if not at 100%, then close to 100%. So, it's going to be interesting to see how that really plays out in the fight, whether it will be as one-sided as some people think it will be. Who knows? But I'm looking forward to it regardless. But in terms of whether it's going to hurt his mystique, it could if he just gets completely, abolished by, completely squashed by Mark Hunt. If he loses, yet via referee decision, and he looks strong in defeat, and he's not completely squashed, and doesn't get knocked out, he'll be just fine. Lesnar will be just fine. But it would add a lot. It would add a lot to Brock Lesnar's aura in WWE, even more than it already has, to beat Mark Hunt and then go into SummerSlam, winning his return to UFC, winning his return to the Octagon, and then whoever he faces at SummerSlam will benefit from being just alone, not even beating or losing to, just being in the ring alone with a hot commodity right now in Brock Lesnar. And who that person might be, I have no idea. I mean, we've heard rumors of Bray Wyatt for a few months. I'd be fine with that match. I'll talk all about this in a future article for Hidden Remote, which should be up over the weekend, in terms of potential opponents of Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. But there's Bray Wyatt. Randy Orton would be a great big-time match. I would love to see that. Never before done other than on an episode of SmackDown in 2002. But other than that, we've never seen Lesnar versus Orton in a big-time marquee match on pay-per-view, and even with Orton being the way that he is now, when they first faced off, 14 years ago on SmackDown, Orton was just a rookie, and so is Lesnar to a respect, so to an extent. But anyway, so we'll talk about that when we get to that over the weekend in my article for Hidden Remote, but just in terms of the whole news breaking with Lesnar, competing for the UFC at 200, like I said, I think it's a win-win. From what I've heard, the pay-per-view that airs over the weekend, UFC 202, the night before SummerSlam, will be just basically one giant commercial for SummerSlam, which is fucking amazing news for WWE. There's been a lot of questions whether we might get a Ronda Rousey appearance out of this, whether we might get a Conor McGregor appearance out of this for WrestleMania. And again, I talked all about this in more in depth on #AskGSM, but I feel like Lesnar didn't really answer the question when he was asked on ESPN. He kind of dodged the question in terms of, whether WWE is set to get something out of this whole deal. I expect there, to be some sort of trade-off with Lesnar going to UFC. And again, he's not there to make an appearance. He's not there to be the special guest ring announcer. He's not there to award a title to somebody. He's there to fucking fight. Vince is putting one of his biggest stars, if not his biggest star, at risk of serious injury at one of UFC's biggest pay-per-views of all time. And UFC is absolutely direct competition to WWE. They may not be pro wrestling, but any sports, any form of sports, any form of entertainment is direct competition to WWE. WWE has it worse than just about anyone else when it comes to competition. TV shows have other TV shows. Raw has those other TV shows. Wrestling as a sport has baseball, has football, all the UFC obviously, which currently has two of their biggest stars in UFC competing at, in WWE competing at UFC 200, and then CM Punk, hopefully UFC 202. So again, they are absolutely direct competition, which is why it shocked me that this whole deal came about, but in a pleasantly surprising way. Not in they shouldn't have done that way, or this is going to be awful way, but shocking in a great way. Something I did not see, or basically anyone did not see coming, and I think it's going to be beneficial to both sides. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out. Like I said, I'm looking forward to the fight. I've not watched the UFC fight in a while. I used to watch the old pay-per-views in my uncle's house, and hoping to go to Buffalo Wild Wings. I got a whole gift card for my birthday last week. Thanks to everyone for the birthday wishes, by the way. I appreciate it. I got a Buffalo Wild Wings gift card last week for my birthday, so I'm going to use that by going to Buffalo Wild Wings for UFC 200. I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully I can hang out with John the same day for some SmackDown versus Raw GM mode, per usual, which I got to hang out with them over the weekend and do that as well, so that was great. But anyway, getting off track here. Yeah, it's just a very exciting news and very exciting time to be a WWE and UFC fan, MMA fan right now. For both worlds, I think it's a win-win deal.